Welcome to a bonus edition of Behind the Mic with AudioFile Magazine. I'm Joe Reed.
Ravi approached the desk and folded his hands on the raised ledge. He leaned forward when she didn't notice him. "Hey," he said. "Can I get some help?" Jessie jolted in her seat and rolled back half a foot. Her eyes were as wide as saucers, and she pressed a hand against her chest. "Holy cow," she said, gasping for air. "You scared the crap out of me." "Sorry about that," he said. He couldn't help but smile. "A little jumpy, I see." "What are you doing here?" He knew she was going to ask that question, and he still wasn't sure he was willing to tell her the truth about how much her text had affected him.
You just heard 2025 Golden Voice, Vikas Adam, narrating The Letters We Keep by Nisha Sharma. Vikas Adam is one of the most dynamic and skilled audiobook narrators working today. With a voice that brings dragons, detectives, and deeply human characters to life, his talent behind the mic has set him apart in the field and has earned him a place as one of AudioFile Magazine's Golden Voices. As actor, director, and teacher, Vikas brings a deep well of theatrical experience and empathy to every performance. He effortlessly voices a host of accents and shifts easily between genders, whether he's narrating a sprawling fantasy series, a poignant family story, or a complex historical narrative. I had the chance to speak with Vikas soon after he was named a Golden Voice. I wanted to talk about his approach to narration, his theatrical roots, and how he builds such distinctive and believable characters. I began our conversation by asking him when acting first entered his life.
I was that performer child who, would see something on the screen and would act it out. It was fascinating. That's, I think, how it started. But first generation Indian in Canada, and it was great as a party trick for my folks. But I think when I started talking about it as a vocation, and I want to do this and I want to do this, maybe there was a little more resistance.
Oh, I would think in my experience, acting is not high up in career choices when your parents are first generation.
Yeah.
From anywhere.
And and the thing is, of course, I completely understand. I understand now. I'm very, very empathetic to them. Hell, if I had a kid right now and my kid was like going, "I want to get into acting," I think there'd be that part of me that would flinch a little and just go, yeah,
Of course.
But I get it. I get it. I'm glad they understood. Finally, it took a while, but they did.
It's hard. I
It
mean,
is hard.
it is definitely not a profession for the weak.
No, it isn't. And you know what it did do is it is something that I take with me so that even when I'm working with my students, I try to keep that sense of reality there for them, but tempered with as much love as I can because I want them to succeed, but at the same time, I do want them to know the realities of it.
Well, how did you move into audiobooks?
So when I was an undergrad and I was in the theater department at Syracuse University, there was an audition for a full cast audiobook. And I went to it. And it was from Bruce Coville. Bruce Coville, the children's author, renowned children's author. For me, it was very special because I had read his books as a kid. So that was even more special. But I went ahead and I auditioned. And to this day, I still bring it up to Bruce whenever I see him. I'm like going, "What were you thinking?" Because this is a full cast audio production. Okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. I've kept it to myself this entire time. But it was for Jennifer Murdley's Toad. And I read the book and I was like, there is no part in here for me really that I could see. But there was one part in there that made me just go, "Oh, this should be fun." And at the audition, I asked him, "Can I go ahead and audition for the character of the woman slash the witch. And this character is the antagonist. She's this beautiful woman who turns out to be the villain and has this evil witch side. And once again, I don't know what Bruce was thinking, but he saw something and he cast me. And that increased my self-esteem like you wouldn't believe. It was such a boost that I needed at that point in my educational career. That was the first. Fast forward many years later, and it's 2012, and I was in LA auditioning and doing all the stuff. And Audible had auditions, and they had a workshop with Scott Brick and Kata Mazer. And I went to that and got up and read, and then went to their audition, which had Mike Charzik and Jason Ojalvo from Audible. And the confidence from remembering of having done the audiobooks with Bruce gave me that little boost I needed confidence wise, where I was like, I can do it. I can do it. Because that imposter syndrome was swimming around. And I auditioned for Mike and Jason, and they asked me, can you do an Indian accent? Because they saw on my resume, and I was like, yeah. So I did the sides that they gave me with an Indian accent, and 2 weeks later, I had my first book, and that's how it started.
What was it about narrating audiobooks that felt right for you?
Being able to encompass all facets of the story, of all the characters, it was amazing for me. I'm a director as well. I'm a producer. I'm a director for theater, and it felt like a one-person show. I love being able to play all these multiple roles. And, quoting Midsummer Night's Dream, my big joke is always, it's like doing audiobooks. You get to be Bottom. You get to be the lion too. And
You're not the first
I,
narrator to
I'm
say that to
sure.
me.
I'm sure.
We all want to be Bottom.
And the funny thing is, and I've done Midsummer is one of those lifer plays for me because I've been involved in Midsummer somehow for so many years, and I've done the show like 3 or 4 times, and I've directed it and produced it and been in it and sound designed it. You name it. I never get sick of it, and I've never played Bottom, so it's fascinating. Yeah, it'll happen. If it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen. But I've never played Bottom.
And how was it for you acting with your voice rather than having your physicality to use to create a character? Everything has to be filtered through that voice.
Yeah. So funny enough, the only restraint I had was because I was seated. I still found a way to be very physical, and I still am very physical when I work. I've just learned how to minimize it and use certain parts of my body and how to be a little quieter
And how to buy appropriate clothing.
and how to buy appropriate clothing, corduroy and workout wear. Quick drying fabric is definitely on the no-no list.
For sure. How do you prepare for narrating a book? For fiction,
Mm-hmm.
most
Yeah,
particularly. Let's start there.
reading through the book. That's a good start. But I'm really looking for writing style. I'm looking to see what that writing style looks like. I get a little esoteric when it comes to this stuff, but I'm looking at the POVs, whether it's first person, third person, what kind of third person, what kind of second person in certain cases. What is the voice of the writing? What is the author trying to convey? What's the setting? What's the world? It's stuff that funny enough, I just came from teaching an acting class, and it's the very things I tell my students to be on the lookout for when they are looking at scripts. It's like, what is the world? What are the rules of this world? What are your parameters? And that tells me how I can start approaching. Is there humor in the text? There's a wonderful series, 2 books that I've done now, the Valerius Mysteries, and they take place in ancient Rome. And it's such a wonderful way to learn about ancient Rome because the author has packed in so much information, but it's so fascinating and interesting. But the writing is in no way what you would imagine ancient Rome to sound like. It's very, very contemporary in its writing and in the voice of our main character. And so that gave me a little insight. He's a party boy, and he talks as such.
Juba hauled me to my bare feet, holding me up by the tunic seams. I think it's past your bedtime, sir. Yes, I was just telling Hersa my new joke, I told him. Hersa began gathering the heavy folds of my toga into his arms. His watery eyes were bleary with sleep, and his hair was sticking out at odd angles from his head, like uneven bits of straw. It was time he found a good barber. Well, any barber. I know a good man in Fish Alley, I confided. Cheap, but good. Hersa frowned. I don't get it, he said unhappily. No, that's not the joke. All the wine I'd drunk at dinner was starting to move around in my stomach like it was searching for an exit.
And so even on that first page, it gave me insight into what liberties I could take and how far I could go.
I want to talk about your Audie Award winner, Nice Dragons Finish Last.
Oh, that was yes.
I am not a fantasy reader or listener.
Okay.
But in preparing for this interview, I said, all right, I'm going to listen. And I really approached it as part of my job.
Okay.
And oh my God, I was so captivated and so thrilled that it's part of a series and I have more of these Heartstriker books to enjoy. It was amazing.
It's such a fun book and a fun series.
And compelling, and the characters are vibrant, and you're creating voices for dragons and people and other magical creatures. So let's talk about how you arrived at these characterizations.
Oh boy.
What was your process here?
So when I work, over the years, as an actor, I have just studied and leaned into and created all these various ways of approaching creating characters. And so with this one, with each of them, I started with archetypes and I built from there. Julius was our sweet, nice, lovely, I say human being, human dragon. And you know what I started doing with him? I actually was like, he is the most ideal version of myself that I wish I could be. I tried to approach it that way. But like Bethesda, his mom, you know, she is the mom, but I looked at this complete queen ruler archetype and just went from there.
His mother sighed, a long hiss so familiar he could almost feel the heat of her flames through the phone. This is harder on me than it is on you, you know, she said at last. But you gave me no choice. Something had to be done. All your brothers and sisters are getting along splendidly. Even Jessica managed to work her doctor nonsense into a position of power. She'll be running that hospital in 5 years. But you are hopeless. If I hadn't watched you hatch myself, I doubt you were a dragon at all.
We've got Bob, who's the seer, he's like a fan favorite. If they ever did a series, like a TV series, I would be trying to fight tooth and nail to be like, y'all, I gotta be Bob. Yeah. And I'm usually not. It's like I'm pretty content being behind the mic, but this would be one where I'd be like, get me in front of the camera. I want to be Bob. He lives in his own reality while he has one foot firmly planted in the one that the book takes place. And it was just so much fun trying to find what set him apart, but while keeping him grounded at the same time. Not just playing crazy to play crazy.
Bob's face broke into a wide smile. I think that little speech might just be the most draconic thing that's ever left your mouth, he said, easily breaking out of Julius's hold. Territoriality, possessiveness, aggression, threats of reprisal. He shook his head in wonder. Why, baby Julius, could you be growing into your fangs at last? Julius had no idea how to respond to that. or how to react when Bob reached down to slap him on the back. "Don't get your feathers in a fluff," he chided. "I'm here to help. I can't let you have all the fun, can I?" Julius gaped at him. "What's fun about almost dying?" "But that's the best sort of fun."
What, there are 5 books in this series.
Yes.
So you're creating voices for everybody, but how do you keep everybody straight throughout all 5 books?
I think it goes back to my experience as an actor and on being on stage, and there would be shows where you're playing multiple roles. There was a time where I did children's theater. When I first got out of undergraduate, I did children's theater as one of my day jobs. And what that meant was, in a professional touring company, we'd be doing these shows, and in some of these shows, you're playing multiple roles, and you have to keep them distinct enough for the kids to follow. I mean, yes, you've got your costumes. Then that also went into other forms of theater that I was doing at night, the more adult avant-garde pieces, where the challenge was, how do you distinguish a character when you're just wearing maybe a tiny accessory, but you're in all black? And then I was going to be forced to like really distinguish them by vocal selection, by vocal choice, by body movement, by a head tilt. And I think all of that started informing how I'm able to keep voices distinct and keep them separate for myself.
And what about the narrative voice, which is so important
Mhm.
for any book?
When it comes to the narrative voice, I've learned over the years, I've definitely, and I continue learning, I want to keep it casual. I want to keep it conversational, especially now as we get into a place where we're listening to podcasts and we're listening to conversations where we are as a society becoming a lot more auditory friendly. And I think a while back, it used to be a place where we needed to be extremely slow, a lot more precious about the words. And now we're at a point where it's so a part of our daily lives that we can make it a little more conversational. And so I try to keep that with the narrative and not get too precious with the words. Once again, it depends. If the writing calls for it, then, I'll make that adjustment.
If the author is living, do you try to connect with her or him before you
Yeah.
begin to narrate? Say Rachel Aaron, who wrote Heartstriker, or Lev A.C. Rosen, who's
Yeah.
writing the Andy Mills books,
Yeah.
another great series.
It depends upon the publisher. Sometimes they're very open and they would love for you to be able to speak to the author, and sometimes they want it to go through the producer instead. And so it just really depends upon who's producing the book. In the case of Rachel, we were able to talk, and we talked many times about the characters. Same with Lev. Lev and I have become very good friends. And whenever a new book comes, it's that time where I'm like, okay, give it to me. Tell me. And he'll actually tell me, you need to watch this movie. Don't ask me which ones. They're completely escaping me right now. But yeah, I'm always wanting to hear what the authors have to say.
Fill us in on the Andy Mills series. I mean, it's a character-driven mystery set in 1950 San Francisco, and Lavender House, the first book in the series, really sets the scene.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That book was so eye-opening to me, and also a really needed book. What I love I love playing opposites. I love dichotomies, and the fact that we have Andy Mills, who is he is a man's man during that time, and the fact that he goes through this journey through the series of books, which are still coming out. That's the stuff I love.
And he's gay.
And he's gay in 1950s, and he's been thrown off the force because he was discovered during the raids that would happen. I love historical fiction because it's like, why couldn't I learn history this way? Yeah, why couldn't I learn it this way?
Is there a special skill in narrating thrillers?
Staying in the moment. I mean, almost forgetting what happens. I think, for me at least, I cannot be thinking about what the big reveal is, or a reveal is. If it's first person, You're there with the character. So you're just going along. And so it's easier to stay in that moment. When it's third person, especially if it's like third person omniscient, where we get everyone's point of view, we're like, okay, it's so easy. Don't think about. You got to stay as neutral as you can. Stay as neutral as you can. Stay as neutral as you can. Don't put the inflection over here. Don't give it away. Yeah.
I don't think, honestly, there is another male narrator who performs women better than you. I frequently forget I'm listening to one actor,
Oh
and
my
I have to
goodness.
remind myself, no, it's not a full
Oh my
cast.
goodness. Thank you so much. That
It's the
is.
absolute truth.
It's such a compliment and such a gift to hear that because I'm going to be honest. There is sometimes fear when it comes to it's like, okay, am I doing too much? Is this too much? Is this right? All sorts of this. It's the actor man. It's the actor mind. We want to make sure we're pleasing our audience. So thank you.
And you're also known to be able to authentically perform accented voices, especially but hardly limited to Indian and South Asian accents. And your ability to perform women and do multi accents in the same book really shines in the Museum of Failures, which I picked up just because the name intrigued me and honestly because you were narrating it.
Thank
I
you.
thought, okay, sure, why not? And I was just really swept away by it.
Oh, that book.
Um,
Oh, it's so beautiful.
yeah, do you want to just give us a bit of a thumbnail?
Yeah, it's a book about Remy, who is estranged from his mother. He's lived in America now for a few years, for a good number of years, and he finds out his mother is not doing well in India, so he goes back to India, and truths are revealed, and there are challenges, and so that's where it starts from.
First impressions are often the last impression, Dad used to say. Dad. The thought of his boisterous, warm-hearted father made Remy smile. It was his first time back since Cyrus had died 3 years ago. He had not visited his mother since then, and he felt the usual pang of guilt at the thought. Well, he would see her in a few hours, would surprise her by showing up at her door. Maybe things would be softer between them now that Daddy was gone and Remy no longer had to protect him from his mother's grievances and sharp barbs.
And the heart of the book is the relationship between
Yeah,
Remy and his mother.
yeah,
And the book changes point of view from him to her. And it easily could have been narrated by two people, but you do them both.
yeah. And that's when I'm number one grateful for being trusted with this. And two, it makes me work harder to really be as respectful to the material because I'm aware of that. I'm aware that this could be someone else. And so I'm always grateful for that. When we recorded those moments, and actually I remember that we took more time recording those chapters, myself and Christina Rooney, who was my director, because I was like, I really want this. I want us to be very, very respectful
Of the mother's
of the
chapters.
mother's chapters.
I screamed and screamed and screamed. I don't know how, but you slept through it all. You slept, my sweet, innocent boy. You slept, unaware of the carnage that had been committed in your name. You slept, blameless, oblivious.
And so we took our time with that. And I gave Christina carte blanche. I was like, going, hey, look, if at any point if it sounds fake, if it sounds like it's coming out of my voice, if you hear Vic starting to bleed in because I may need to like survive a little bit and come back to me and not get lost, let me know. No ego. And then we'll take a break and I'll come back and we'll redo it or something. And that's about having an amazing director that you trust.
Another tricky book, I think, would have been Saru Brierley's memoir, Lion, which was made into a film. And it tells the story of a little boy in India who was born into great poverty and who gets lost, who loses his family, ends up in an orphanage, and is adopted by a family in Australia. And as I said, it's a memoir, so it's a true story. And you narrate it with an Australian accent.
I had requested that we have an Australian director or someone who is very familiar with the Australian accent so that I could have someone there to call me out on and correct me if needed. And also someone there to be able to bounce off pronunciations, because I'm one of those people who I will second guess a word when I'm reading it, and I'll be like, wait a minute, wait a minute, is it tomato or is it tomato? Wait a minute, would this from this region, would they pronounce it this way or would they pronounce it that way? And it's not something that you can necessarily in your prep really get ready for, because there's always going to be a surprise, because as anyone who's done an audiobook knows, you really get time to really do one read, maybe 1.5 words, like you're doing a really quicker one and you're reading it a second time. But in that prep, you're not going to catch everything. So that's where, once again, it's a village.
As we said, Lion is a memoir. And while it recounts Saru's search for his biological family in India when he's an adult, a lot of the book is him reminiscing about his childhood and his growing up. So he's looking back a lot. Yet your job is keeping the narrative moving forward. I mean, that's what's crucial to any book. So it's kind of like driving a car forward while you're looking in the rear view mirror. That's sort of the balance you had to strike.
Yeah, and when it came to that book, I remember seeing the video that was making the rounds about his journey, and I was so inspired by that anyway. And then I watched videos of him speaking and tried to pull as much of his cadence into the book, into his voice when he was reflecting and narrating.
After dinner, when our mother went out, perhaps to see if she could get us some more food, Guddu announced that he was leaving, going back to Burrampur. The thought of once again being left behind without my brother, a little kid stuck at home with nothing to do, was too much. I jumped up and said, "I'm coming with you." It was early evening. If I went with him, there was little likelihood of him getting me back home that night.
But it's like with any form of acting where it's like you don't want to tell the audience what to feel. You want to give just enough and you want to connect. But it's not my job to tell them how to feel. It's to present it. And then you feel the way you're going to feel.
You've narrated quite a few books for young people, including an edition of Lion.
Yeah.
Some 7 years after you originally recorded it. How was it coming back to it?
I felt a little more confident because we had done the first one. It's funny. I was like wearing a comfy jacket that I hadn't worn in a while, and I didn't think I would feel that way. I was a lot more comfortable.
I know you want to bring your best to every book, but do
Yeah.
you feel a special responsibility when you narrate for young readers?
Always. You know what? I feel that way about every single book, though. That's the thing. And so I can't just go, oh, it's for young readers, and put on a hat of I need to necessarily do or change anything. It's always going to be reflected by the writing, but I try not to speak down to them. That's the main thing. Try not to, because I'm sure there'll be some people who'll hear something and they'll be like, "Well, he's speaking down to someone." And I'm like, "Oh, that wasn't my intent." But if that's what you heard, then that's what you heard. But yeah, I try really hard to be as honest as I can be and to be as connected as I can be, especially with the writing. And I try to still live in it.
Because you come from theater, which is so collaborative,
Mm,
and with audiobooks, you're recording in a booth. If you're lucky, you're working with a director
mm-hmm,
or a producer,
mm-hmm,
but basically you're by yourself.
mm-hmm.
Can you talk about the difference between doing it alone and working in the company of others?
When I'm by myself, I feel a little more prone to being self-judgmental, and I will stop myself more. Whereas if someone else is there, I don't do it as much, whether it's an engineer or whether it's a director. I think it stems from, oh, there's a trust where if something sounds off, they will stop me. And I have been able to develop, even when I'm working with an engineer, a strong enough relationship so that they feel comfortable being able to say, you know what, that, do you want to redo that? And they don't have to tell me why, but it's just enough where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. You obviously heard something that sounded off, so I'm going to redo it.
You do multicast productions, as we said, and you do a number of two-handers, often in romance novels. Thinking of Nisha Sharma's Shakespeare-inspired rom-com trilogy,
Yes.
or The Setup, both of which you
Yeah.
narrated with Sunila Nankani.
I love her. I love her.
So, do you reach out? How much do you and Sunila do you talk about tone and pacing and characterization? How much do you communicate with other narrators?
When it comes to working with other narrators, I definitely try to talk with them about it, especially depending on who's going to be recording first. When it comes to like the two-handers, everyone's got a different schedule. So you don't know who's going to be recording first or not. And it's super important to communicate, whether it's about character voices, whether it's about tone, as you said. Oftentimes, when we have done enough of a certain genre or of a certain, if we know a writer, know of their work, then we get an idea. But if it's a series, yes, you can almost get away with not having to have those conversations again. But even if it's the same writer, if it's a different book, and I'm specifically thinking about Nisha's, we did the Shakespeare rom-coms, but then we did The Letters We Keep. And the writing on that was very different. That was a new adult book, and it was a lot more subdued. Sometimes I will think of books in colors, and sometimes tonally, and I'll see paintings or whatever. And The Letters We Keep had a very muted palette for me compared to the Shakespeare trilogy, which was very vibrant and very bright.
How do you choose what books to take on, what projects to take on as a narrator?
It's a mix. I will sometimes hear of books or see books that are in the pipeline, and I will try to reach out and find out, hey, can I be considered for this and audition? Other times it's offers. They were books that were never on my radar, and those are always wonderful surprises because there's a producer who thinks that I'm the right fit for it, and then I'm reading it and I'm going, holy cow, I am the right fit for this. Thank you so much. But then there's some books that either because of time or because I'll look at it and I'll go, I am having a challenging time connecting with this, and I don't feel it's right for me to do this because this is somebody's baby. Even if someone else is like, oh no, it'll sound fine, it'll be great. There's something about me knowing. And so there's multiple things and that play into it.
You narrate nonfiction as well as
Yeah.
fiction. Do you prepare differently for nonfiction than you do for fiction?
They both have different styles. Once again, it goes back to the writing. It's really looking once again at the writer's style, seeing what they're trying to communicate, and most importantly, not telling the listener what to feel.
Well, you narrated It Was Vulgar and It Was Beautiful by Jack
Oh,
Lowry
yes.
about AIDS activists using art to fight the epidemic in the 80s.
Yeah.
And I thought you showed a lot of restraint in that book.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's such a difficult story. I think you don't want to add, do you know what I mean? You
You
don't want to
don't.
make it melodramatic.
Absolutely. And you're finding that you're trying to find, you're towing the line. And that's where, when you're recording by yourself, it can be so challenging because you're feeling it. You're, oh my God, yeah, I'm feeling it. I'm here. I'm in the moment, blah, all that sort of stuff. But then you go back and you listen to it and you're like, oh my God, could I just flip my boa and like throw my cigarette ash down while I'm at it? Which is why I'm always loving having a director or an engineer, just so that I can then ask, was that too much? And if you have a good enough relationship, they'll be like, you may want to listen to it. Or a director will be like, yeah, let's take it back again. I still remember This is a different book on the AIDS epidemic, Viral by Ann
Oh, yeah.
Bossum. And that was a juvenile nonfiction book. And that's an excellent example of doing books for young readers, but not pandering down. It was in the writing.
So it went in the opening years of the epidemic. Some people died with breathtaking haste, especially in the beginning. Julie Rode, a Broadway stage manager at the time, recalled how you watched people die rapid, hard deaths. There one week, gone the next. You never knew who would show up to perform on any given night. People would go fast, New York artist Kenny Scharf told a journalist in 2017. One minute they were a beautiful 20-year-old, the next you could see the look of death in their face. AIDS historian David France described a coworker in New York who stayed out late on a Thursday night to attend a concert. Friday he had a fever. Sunday he was hospitalized. Wednesday he was dead. People whose lives had barely begun found themselves facing their imminent demise.
And I remember there was a section in that book where they're talking about the periodical that would come out back then, where they would list the names of people who had passed due to AIDS. And we got to a point in the chapter where there was the big reveal of enough work had been done. So the first time there were no deaths. The first time ever. And I remember I got through that. I was like, read it, got through it. We stopped. And then myself and Andrea Kaufman, my director, we bawled. Still getting a little choked up thinking about that one.
Yeah.
Because it's such a powerful memory. And you can't plan for that stuff. You can't plan for these types of gifts that you receive. When I received that book, I wasn't thinking about that. I wasn't planning anything like that. Yeah, you just stay in the moment.
Vikas, you act on film, you act on stage, you're a director, you're a teacher, you have an extensive career narrating audiobooks. How is your work-life balance doing?
Yeah. Okay. It goes back to I'm a freelancer still. I work for myself. So anyone who owns their own small business will tell you you're always on the clock. You're always thinking about, oh my God, the next job. Even when it's like I've had those moments where I'm like, I'll be fine. I'll be fine if I'm booked out till X date. But then it's like, oh, but I can't really enjoy the vacation and that's planned in there because I'm thinking about the books that are having to do after that. But then if you book until the vacation and you're like, oh, when I come back from vacation, I have nothing, because then I'll just pick up from there. You're freaking out during vacation because it's like, oh my God, I've got no work. But one of the things that does make it a lot more balanced than it used to be is having a wonderful spouse and a wonderful fur child who make coming home too worth it, even though my home studio booth is in the house. But you know what I mean? But it's
You're talking about your pooch.
my pooch,
Yeah.
my little Emma.
As you've mentioned, you teach at UCLA and have done for years,
Yeah.
14 years, which is a wonderful way to keep on learning.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
So how does teaching help you in the booth with your work?
Practice what I preach. Practice what I preach. I cannot, in good conscience, tell my students, you gotta do this, if I can't do that. And it's that plain and simple. That it's kind of selfish in a way because it's keeping me on task, but it's really about having them understand what it really does take. And if I'm telling you something, it's not just because the teacher's guidebook says that's what you're supposed to say, and then it's not a do as I say, not as I do. That's one of the main things. But the other thing I really love about teaching is I do continue learning. I continue learning from them, and it also keeps me on my toes as to, okay, So this one thing that works, it works for me. Does it work for them? Oh, it doesn't work for them. Okay, well, I got to come up with something new that's going to work for them. And then maybe that's something I can try for myself and see if it'll work for me. And then maybe that can bring some new juice to my work.
And finally, what does it mean for you to be named a Golden Voice?
It's a true honor because so many people I love and respect and who are dear, dear friends of mine are a part of it. Yeah, it's a badge of honor, but it's also it's a huge thank you for me. Look, as actors, we're artists. We want to be recognized. And I understand that I am a lucky one in this business. There are so many narrators now, especially, who do not get the recognition that I've been so fortunate to receive, and absolutely grateful for it. It's a true gift. And I'm very thankful for it.
And a well-deserved one. So thank you. And thank you for many hours.
Thank you. And here's to many more hours.
Definitely.
Here's to many more hours. I'm definitely still. I as I said, I continue learning, and I'm hoping to continue evolving as well.
And I look forward to hearing what comes out of your mouth while you do it.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was 2025 Golden Voice Vikas Adam. You can check out reviews for hundreds of audiobooks narrated by Vikas at audiofilemagazine.com. Next Friday, it's another bonus episode, my interview with 2025 Golden Voice Kimberly Farr. Follow Behind the Mic wherever you get your podcasts, and if you have a moment, leave us a rating. It helps other people to find us. This has been a bonus edition of Behind the Mic. Behind the Mic is produced by Jessica Lockhart, Robin Whitten, Michelle Cobb, Stephen Cummings, Leslie Fine, Alan Minskoff, Alex Ritchie, Laura Rossi, and Kendra Winchester are our contributors. Jennifer Dow and Coco McCracken are our editors. And the music is William Ross Chernoff's Nomads 4-Way. I'm Jo Reed. Good listening.